Sometimes the loneliest place in the world is a room full of people. Hannah thought as she walked into the school's annual fall fundraiser, her son's little hand tucked in hers, feeling the buzz of chatter and laughter around her, yet sensing an invisible barrier separating her from everyone else. She scanned the crowd of parents and teachers, many engaged in animated conversations or sharing stories about their children, and realized she had not known anyone here, the familiar comfort of her own home replaced by this strange social landscape, and the pang of being a single mom in a room where everyone seemed paired or clustered made her heart sink slightly, a cocktail of anxiety and anticipation swirling as she searched for a safe spot to sit while keeping her son close, finally spotting an empty chair at the edge of a circular table, far from the main action, and she led him over, murmuring a gentle reminder to smile and be polite, hoping the seat would offer a temporary refuge from her self-consciousness. As they settled, she noticed the table's other occupants were busy, glancing up only briefly with polite nods, leaving her with a moment to breathe and scan the room, her eyes catching on small details she had overlooked on the way in, from the subtle decorations that reflected the autumn theme to the soft background music that created a warm atmosphere. Yet even amidst these comforting touches, she felt a twinge of isolation, a sense that despite being surrounded by familiar faces and concept, she and her son were outsiders in practice, her thoughts drifting to how her life had changed over the last few years since her separation. The challenges of balancing work and parenting alone, the loneliness of arriving at social events without a partner to share the moment, and the small victories of her son adapting, laughing at jokes, or finding small friends to play with, all adding layers to her complex emotions, a mixture of pride and underlying tension. As she watched the scene unfold, a quiet presence nearby drew her attention. Ethan, a single dad she had never met, stood by the buffet table observing the crowd with a calm demeanor, his eyes scanning the room in a way that suggested he noticed things others did not. The subtle way he adjusted his cufflinks or straightened his tie seemed methodical but not rigid, a man aware of his surroundings yet not seeking attention, and she felt a fleeting curiosity about him, wondering who he was and why he seemed so attentive without intruding. The ambient noise of laughter and conversation blended with the gentle clinking of plates, and Hannah sipped her cider, feeling the warmth of the cup in her hands as a small anchor, a tangible connection to the moment while her mind navigated the undercurrent of nervousness and hope that tonight might bring an unexpected connection or at least a brief reprieve from the usual solitude she experienced, her son tugging slightly at her sleeve to point out a balloon in the corner, a reminder of the innocence and simple joys that softened her anxiety. As she smiled at him, her thoughts drifting to possibilities, both ordinary and extraordinary, and she realized that sometimes, even in the busiest rooms, an empty chair could offer not only physical space but also the beginning of new interactions, the first step toward understanding and connection, and she felt her heart lighten, a cautious anticipation stirring, as she looked up once more at the crowd, unaware that a small act of noticing would soon transform this evening and begin a story neither of them could have predicted. Hannah adjusted the strap of her son's backpack, feeling the subtle weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders as she observed the room, noting the quiet corners where groups of parents clustered together, their conversations light and filled with laughter, while she and her son remained slightly apart, a small island in the middle of activity. Ethan, meanwhile, had noticed her from across the room, the way she gently guided her child with patient hands, her eyes scanning the crowd yet lingering briefly on details as if cataloging the scene with care, and something about her quiet presence drew his attention, a curiosity that was neither intrusive nor forced, simply an observation born of genuine interest, and as he sipped his drink, he found himself wondering what story lay behind that careful glance and gentle posture. Imagining the challenges and triumphs that shaped her, the silent victories of single parenting, the subtle moments that required courage and grace in equal measure, Hannah, feeling slightly more settled at the edge of the table, noticed a small mishap as her son accidentally knocked over his cup, the liquid spilling onto the napkin, and without a word, Ethan quietly approached with a few extra napkins, his presence calm and reassuring, offering help in a way that felt natural rather than imposing. and she felt a spark of gratitude, a sense of connection forming without words, a bridge built through simple gestures and mutual awareness. They exchanged a brief smile, a recognition of shared understanding and unspoken empathy, and for a moment, the room seemed to contract around them. The noise fading into background hum as awareness centered on this subtle exchange, a seed planted that might grow into conversation, shared laughter, or even companionship, each aware yet unobtrusive, respecting boundaries while acknowledging presence. Hannah returned to her seat, dabbing carefully at the spill, feeling a mixture of relief and curiosity, her attention flicking to Ethan as he moved back to his group, yet maintaining a subtle watchfulness, a gentle acknowledgement that did not demand engagement but allowed space for comfort and observation. And she thought about how rare such interactions could be, how the simplest act of noticing, of offering help without expectation, could shift the emotional tone of an evening, making a room that felt vast and intimidating suddenly approachable, warm, and subtly inclusive. And as she glanced at her son, seeing his eyes light up with small triumphs in the games and chatter around, she felt a delicate balance of pride and anticipation, aware that this night might unfold with unexpected opportunities for connection, and that in these quiet exchanges, beginnings were often found, unnoticed at first, yet powerful in their potential to transform ordinary moments into something memorable, a story waiting to be told through the small, significant gestures that defined human interaction. As the evening continued, Hannah expected the brief interaction with Ethan to remain nothing more than a polite moment between two parents attending the same event. She focused on helping her son enjoy the activities, encouraging him to participate in games and introduce himself to other children. Little by little, he began relaxing, and seeing his confidence grow helped ease some of her own discomfort. Across the room, Ethan remained quietly observant. He noticed how Hannah always seemed to put her son first, making sure he felt included before thinking about herself. It reminded him of his own experience raising his 10-year-old son, Mason, after becoming a single father several years earlier. He understood the exhaustion that came from carrying every responsibility alone, and perhaps that was why he felt an unexpected sense of understanding towards someone he had only observed from a distance. A few minutes later, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the small stage and announced a series of raffle drawings that would help raise money for school programs. Volunteers began distributing additional raffle tickets to parents who wanted to participate. Hannah glanced toward the line forming near the stage and immediately decided against joining it. The crowd looked overwhelming, and she preferred staying near her son. Ethan noticed her expression. He watched her look at the raffle table, then quietly look away. Without drawing attention to himself, he walked over to one of the volunteers and purchased several extra tickets. Then he handed one of them to the volunteer with a simple request. "Could you give this to the woman sitting near the back table with the blue sweater? Just tell her another parent thought she should be included." The volunteer smiled and agreed. A few moments later, Hannah looked surprised when a raffle ticket was placed in her hand. "Someone wanted you to have this," the volunteer explained. Hannah blinked in confusion. "Who?" The volunteer glanced around the room and pointed discreetly toward Ethan before walking away. Hannah followed the direction with her eyes. Ethan happened to look over at that exact moment. Instead of approaching her, he simply offered a small nod and returned his attention to the stage. The gesture caught her completely off guard. It was not the ticket itself that mattered. It was the thought behind it. He had noticed she was standing alone and found a way to include her without making her uncomfortable. There was no attempt to impress her, no expectation of recognition, just kindness. For the first time that evening, Hannah felt genuinely seen. As the raffle drawings continued, her son excitedly examined the ticket as though it were a winning lottery number. His enthusiasm made her laugh. Nearby, Ethan smiled when he heard the laughter. It was the first time he had seen her completely relaxed all evening. A short while later, an even more unexpected moment occurred. Mason wandered over to the table where Hannah and her son were sitting. The two boys quickly discovered they attended the same school and shared an interest in baseball. Within minutes, they were talking comfortably as if they had known each other for months. Hannah watched the interaction with quiet amazement. Sometimes children formed connections far more easily than adults. She looked across the room and noticed Ethan watching the boys as well. This time, when their eyes met, Neither looked away immediately. And for the first time that night, Hannah found herself wondering if the quiet father across the room might become more than just a kind stranger. The remainder of the fundraiser passed more quickly than Hannah expected. What had begun as an uncomfortable evening slowly transformed into something entirely different. Her son and Mason spent nearly every minute together, moving from one activity to another with the effortless enthusiasm that only children seemed capable of. Watching them laugh and exchange stories made Hannah realize how rarely she allowed herself to relax at events like this. Usually, she spent most of her energy worrying about whether her son felt included. Tonight, for the first time in a long while, that worry had faded. As the boys continued talking, Hannah gathered enough courage to walk across the room toward Ethan. She knew she wanted to thank him properly. The raffle ticket itself had been a small gesture, but the thought behind it had meant more than he probably realized. Ethan noticed her approaching and immediately stood up from his chair. "Hi," Hannah said with a warm smile. "I wanted to thank you." Ethan looked slightly confused. "For what?" Hannah laughed softly. "For the raffle ticket. And for making sure I did not spend the entire evening sitting by myself." Ethan's expression showed genuine surprise. "I was not trying to embarrass you." "You did not," Hannah replied. "Actually, you did the opposite." For a moment, they simply stood there, both smiling awkwardly. Then the conversation began flowing more naturally than either expected. Hannah learned that Ethan worked as a project manager for a construction company and had lived in the area most of his life. Ethan learned that Hannah worked remotely for a healthcare support company and had moved to town 3 years earlier after accepting a new position. As they talked, they discovered several unexpected similarities. Both had experienced the challenges of raising children alone. Both spent weekends balancing household responsibilities with youth sports schedules. Both understood the strange combination of pride and exhaustion that came with being the only parent available for every decision, every school meeting, and every difficult moment. The conversation felt remarkably easy. There was no pressure to impress one another. No need to pretend life was perfect. Instead, there was honesty, understanding, and a sense of relief that came from speaking with someone who genuinely understood the realities of single parenthood. Meanwhile, the boys continued building their own friendship. At one point, Mason excitedly invited Hannah's son to attend a local baseball clinic the following Saturday. The invitation immediately sparked enthusiasm between them. Hannah hesitated briefly, unsure whether accepting would be appropriate. Before she could respond, Ethan smiled. "You should come. It is a community event. Lots of families attend." Hannah appreciated how casually he said it. There was no expectation behind the invitation, just an opportunity. By the time the fundraiser began winding down, the school gym looked very different from when Hannah first arrived. Tables were being cleared. Decorations were coming down. Parents were gathering coats and saying goodbye. Yet the empty feeling she had carried into the room earlier was completely gone. As everyone prepared to leave, Mason and Hannah's son exchanged excited promises about seeing each other again. Ethan stood beside them, hands in his pockets, looking both hopeful and uncertain. Hannah felt something similar. As they walked toward the exit together, she realized she no longer viewed Ethan as the quiet stranger who had noticed her from across a crowded room. He had become someone she genuinely wanted to know better. Standing outside beneath the cool evening sky, they exchanged phone numbers so the boys could stay in touch. It seemed like a simple decision. Yet as Hannah drove home later that night, she could not stop smiling. Because deep down, she had a feeling that this was not the end of an evening. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. During the days that followed, Hannah found herself thinking about the fundraiser more often than she expected. Life quickly returned to its normal rhythm of early mornings, school drop-offs, work deadlines, grocery lists, and evening homework sessions, yet something felt different. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel quite as alone carrying the weight of everyday responsibilities. The reason surprised her. It was not because someone had solved her problems. It was because someone understood them. Ethan occasionally sent simple messages about the boys. Sometimes he would share a reminder about an upcoming school event. Other times he would pass along a photograph of Mason proudly holding a baseball glove after practice. The conversations remained casual, but they became increasingly natural. There was no pressure to respond immediately and no expectation that every message needed to become a lengthy discussion. Instead, a quiet sense of comfort developed between them. Saturday arrived sooner than expected. The community baseball clinic was being held at a local sports complex just outside town. The weather was perfect, with clear blue skies and a light breeze that carried the sounds of excited children across the fields. Hannah parked her car and immediately spotted Mason waving enthusiastically toward her son. Within seconds, the boys were running across the grass together, leaving the adults behind. Hannah laughed as she watched them disappear toward the registration area. "I think they have been waiting for this all week," Ethan said as he approached. "I think you are right," Hannah replied. They began walking toward the bleachers together. What started as small talk quickly turned into something deeper. Sitting side by side while the boys participated in drills, they spoke openly about the realities of raising children alone. Hannah admitted that some days felt overwhelming. She described the pressure of making every decision by herself and constantly worrying whether she was doing enough as a mother. Ethan nodded with immediate understanding. He shared stories about balancing work commitments with school activities and the guilt he sometimes felt whenever he missed important moments because of unexpected responsibilities. For the first time in years, Hannah found herself speaking honestly without filtering her thoughts. She did not need to explain why certain situations felt exhausting. Ethan already understood. He had lived similar experiences. The connection felt genuine because it was built on shared reality rather than assumptions. As the morning continued, they cheered for the boys, laughed at their enthusiasm, and exchanged stories about memorable parenting moments. More than once, they found themselves finishing each other's thoughts. The ease of the conversation surprised them both. By lunchtime, the clinic had ended, but neither family seemed eager to leave. The boys immediately asked if they could eat together before going home. Ethan glanced toward Hannah. "Would that be okay with you?" he asked. Hannah smiled. "I think they already made the decision for us." A nearby family restaurant became the next stop. Sitting around a table filled with sandwiches, fries, and endless conversation, the atmosphere felt unexpectedly comfortable. The boys talked nonstop about baseball, while Hannah and Ethan shared stories about their children growing up. There was laughter, understanding, and a growing sense of familiarity. As the afternoon came to an end and the families prepared to head home, Hannah realized something important. The friendship forming between the children was meaningful, but the connection developing between her and Ethan was becoming meaningful too. It was not rushed. It was not dramatic. It was simply two people discovering that someone else truly understood the journey they had been walking alone for far too long. That evening, after the boys were tucked into bed and the quiet of the house settled in, Hannah found herself reflecting on the day. She had expected a normal Saturday, full of errands and routines, yet it had turned into something far more meaningful. Ethan's presence had been effortless, blending into the flow of her family's life without fanfare or expectation. He had listened attentively to every detail about the boys, asked thoughtful questions, and offered small gestures of support without intruding. As she sipped her cup of herbal tea, the warmth spread not only through her hands but also through her thoughts, bringing a sense of calm she had not felt in years. She remembered how the morning had started with the boys rushing across the baseball field, their laughter echoing against the bright sky, and how Ethan had followed, not as an outsider, but as someone genuinely interested in sharing those moments. Their conversation while cheering from the bleachers had been easy, flowing from parenting challenges to shared memories, without awkward pauses or forced laughter. Hannah realized that she had been so accustomed to managing every detail on her own that she had almost forgotten the comfort of genuine companionship. Ethan had not only understood the responsibilities she carried, but had also mirrored the empathy and patience she offered in return. The idea of connection, once intimidating after years of solo parenting, now seemed natural. She smiled at the thought, recognizing that trust was slowly building, not through grand gestures, but through consistency, respect, and shared experience. Later, when they had sat down for lunch, watching the boys continue their animated discussions about baseball, every joke he laughed at, every encouragement he gave the children, had strengthened a quiet bond between them. As she reflected, she felt a lightness, a sense that life did not have to be navigated alone. Messages from Ethan over the past week, photographs of small achievements, or casual texts about upcoming events had already shown a reliability that Hannah had rarely experienced outside her own family. Now, after spending the day together, it was clear that this connection extended beyond convenience or coincidence. It was intentional and grounded in mutual understanding. Hannah knew that there were no shortcuts, no dramatic declarations, just the slow weaving of trust and respect into a foundation strong enough to support a meaningful relationship. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the quiet breathing of her children upstairs, and the fading light through the window created a peaceful atmosphere as Hannah considered what tomorrow might bring. She realized that sometimes, life's most unexpected moments, like a quiet father showing up at a community event or sharing a simple laugh over sandwiches, could shift perspectives and reshape the sense of what family and support truly meant. In that moment, she felt hope and clarity, recognizing that connection, understanding, and presence were more impactful than any grand gesture, and that the day's events had quietly, but profoundly, changed her outlook. The following morning, Hannah awoke to the soft light filtering through the curtains and the faint sounds of her children stirring in the next room, their laughter mixing with the aroma of breakfast she had already started preparing. The previous day's events lingered in her mind, a quiet warmth that made her smile as she moved through the kitchen, setting plates and pouring juice. Ethan had texted early, a simple message asking how the morning was going, and she found herself pausing before replying, savoring the feeling of being noticed and cared for beyond the daily responsibilities she managed alone. At the breakfast table, the boys animatedly recounted their weekend adventures, and Hannah observed the subtle ways Ethan's presence had influenced them even in his absence, reminding her that connection did not always require proximity, but consistency and genuine interest. Later, as she walked the children to school, her phone buzzed with another text from Ethan, a friendly suggestion to meet for a casual coffee after work, and she realized that life was beginning to feel less like a solitary routine and more like a shared experience. Throughout the day, small moments reminded her of the bond forming. A thoughtful reminder about one of the children's appointments, an encouraging word for her work project, a lighthearted joke that made her laugh despite the stress of her responsibilities. Each interaction, though seemingly ordinary, added layers to the trust and understanding they were cultivating. That afternoon, Hannah reflected on how remarkable it was that someone could enter her life so unobtrusively, yet make such a meaningful impact, respecting boundaries while offering support, laughter, and attentiveness. She considered the delicate balance she maintained daily, juggling work, home life, and the emotional needs of her children, and how Ethan's presence offered a gentle reminder that support and partnership could exist without disruption or expectation. In the evening, as she prepared dinner, Hannah's thoughts wandered to the simple joy of shared meals and conversation, of having someone who noticed the little details and valued the rhythms of her life. The quiet moments of connection, the easy exchange of stories and laughter, the understanding glances during hectic times, all of these underscored a developing partnership rooted in empathy and authenticity. Sitting down with her children later, she felt a sense of completeness, a recognition that life was slowly becoming more cooperative, more compassionate, and more fulfilling. It was in these ordinary moments, preparing breakfast, walking to school, exchanging texts, and sharing quiet observations, that Hannah understood how profoundly small acts of attention and care could shape daily life, offering reassurance, comfort, and a sense of shared purpose. By nightfall, she felt a renewed sense of hope and clarity, realizing that trust and meaningful relationships were not defined by grand gestures, but by consistent presence, attentiveness, and genuine regard for one another, and that the path she was on, though unexpected, held promise for a life enriched by partnership and mutual understanding. Several weeks passed, and what had begun as a chance encounter at a school fundraiser gradually became part of Hannah's everyday life. The connection between the two families grew naturally through shared routines, weekend activities, and countless small conversations that carried more meaning than either of them initially realized. Saturday baseball games became a familiar tradition. School events no longer felt intimidating. Even simple errands occasionally turned into opportunities for the boys to spend time together while Hannah and Ethan shared coffee and conversation. Everything seemed to be moving in a comfortable direction until one particularly difficult Thursday reminded Hannah how unpredictable life could be. The morning started with a missed alarm, followed by a work deadline that arrived sooner than expected. Then she received a call from the school informing her that her son was not feeling well and needed to be picked up early. Hannah immediately left work, collected him from the nurse's office, and brought him home. Throughout the afternoon, she attempted to balance caring for him while also meeting professional obligations. By early evening, she felt completely exhausted. Her laptop remained open on the kitchen table, unfinished tasks filled her screen, dishes sat untouched in the sink, and worry lingered in the back of her mind. She never mentioned any of this to Ethan. In fact, she intentionally avoided sending messages because she did not want to burden anyone with her problems. Around 7 o'clock, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. Ethan had sent a simple text asking how her day had gone. Hannah stared at the screen for several moments before replying honestly. She admitted that it had been one of those days where everything seemed to happen at once. Ethan responded almost immediately. His message was not dramatic. He did not offer solutions or advice. Instead, he simply wrote that he understood and hoped tomorrow would feel easier. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Hannah opened it and froze in surprise. Ethan stood on the porch holding 2 grocery bags and a container from a local restaurant. "Before you say anything," he said with a small smile, "this is not a rescue mission. Mason and I were already out getting dinner. I thought you might appreciate not having to cook tonight." Hannah looked at the bags, then back at Ethan. She felt emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. Nobody had done something like that for her in years. Not because the gesture was expensive or extraordinary, but because it showed thoughtfulness. He had noticed she was struggling and chose to help without making her feel incapable. Her son immediately brightened when he saw Mason waiting in the car. Within minutes, the boys were sitting together at the kitchen table eating dinner and talking about school. The atmosphere inside the house changed completely. The stress that had filled every corner earlier seemed to fade. As Hannah watched the boys laugh and Ethan quietly help organize the grocery bags, she realized something important. Over the past few months, he had become more than a friend from a school event. He had become someone she trusted, someone whose presence brought comfort rather than complication. Later that evening, after the boys finished their homework and the house finally grew quiet, Hannah found herself looking around the kitchen and noticing something she had not felt in a very long time. For the first time since becoming a single mother, the weight of carrying everything alone no longer felt quite so heavy. The following morning arrived quietly, the sunlight filtering softly through the living room windows as Hannah prepared breakfast while her son read at the kitchen table. Mason, ever observant, noticed how tense she had been the previous day and chose to let her rest in peace while taking care of small chores without comment. They moved through the morning in a calm, unspoken rhythm. The boys played together happily, laughter punctuating the air in a way that seemed to lift a burden from Hannah's shoulders. By late morning, Hannah felt a rare sense of peace, a clarity that had been absent for years. She realized that life did not have to be a constant struggle, that support could appear in the most unexpected ways. Around noon, Mason suggested a spontaneous walk in the nearby park, and the trio bundled up and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers, and for the first time in a long time, Hannah felt truly present in a moment rather than preoccupied with tasks and worries. As they walked, Mason engaged her son in conversation, asking questions, listening patiently, and occasionally tossing a ball to keep the energy light and playful. Hannah found herself laughing genuinely, feeling gratitude for his quiet attentiveness and consistent kindness. She observed how natural the dynamic had become, the ease of their interactions, the small gestures of care that demonstrated understanding without expectation. Later that afternoon, back at home, they settled into a casual game of board games and storytelling. Mason's presence was gentle, never imposing, and he allowed Hannah space to participate fully while also giving her son moments to shine. She noticed how much confidence and happiness had returned to her son's demeanor, the way he shared ideas and jokes freely, feeling secure with both adults nearby. Evening arrived with soft shadows stretching across the living room, and Mason helped Hannah tidy up, all without drawing attention to the effort. Dinner was a relaxed affair, conversation flowing naturally, with the boys joking and Hannah feeling a warmth in her chest she had not felt in a long time. As night fell, the house quieted once more, and Hannah reflected on the past months, the seemingly small acts that had gradually built a foundation of trust and comfort. She understood that this connection, this mutual care between her, her son, and Mason, was more profound than any fleeting acquaintance. It was a bond of attentiveness, reliability, and gentle affection, a network of support that strengthened with each shared smile and thoughtful action. As she finally prepared for bed, she glanced at the living room, empty now, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life, she realized, could be challenging yet filled with unexpected kindness, and that moments of sincere connection could transform ordinary days into experiences full of meaning and warmth, a lesson she intended to carry forward, nurturing this newfound sense of family and community in every small interaction to come.